have a series of sessions, at least monthly twice, starting from today, right? So maybe another couple of weeks, we will have one more session uh, for any either on the technology part or in terms of the process part. Maybe next section we can talk about more on Viva and its functions and Salesforce. Predominantly the applications that we are using for CSL so that everybody will let to know what that application is about. And also, so today's session is more to talk about what is GXP. So before we want to get into that, first of all, we need to understand how exactly a drug is being manufactured. So let us take an example, right? So we have a COVID. So how would have they come out with a drug to solve this vaccine or something like that? So first of all, once a disease is identified, so they isolate a protein involved in the disease, and that protein is analyzed, and they have a counter protein that will be identified to see how it can manage the disease creating protein, right? And so once they identify a protein which gives a lot of results, they analyze statistically and also in terms of, how effective the drug is, what is the efficacy, meaning the strength of the drug. So everything is analyzed in a more scientific way. And once they come to a conclusion that this particular protein is working, they start administrating the drug in animals. Mostly they use uh, rabbits or you know um, this rats, and that itself. So once they identify that the drug is working fine, at least it has some effects, and also they study the side effects because of this particular thing. And then they get into uh, you know a different research and then see what is the effect and other things. And once that is done, it is forwarded for formulation. So when I say formulation, so some of the, some of the drugs we get in the form of tablets, some of the drugs we get in the form of capsules, and some of the drugs we get as syrups for kids, right? So that is the formulation. So they need to identify whether which type of formulation it is going to have. See all this, and then slowly they will scale up. Maybe uh, once they've finalized the formulation, they will start manufacturing it at a very small level, like say, for example, say 50 numbers or 100 numbers, and then they need to file for the FDA, uh, Food and Drug Administration. See, each country, before that, we need to understand each country has their own uh, food and drug administrations. Like for a US, they call it as Federal Organization for Drug and Food Administration. Similarly, Europe has a European Medical Agency, which approves all the drug which goes for the European area. And similarly, UK has MHRA. MHRA is Medicine and Health Regulation Authority. And similarly, India has IDRS, so Indian Drug Regulation Society. So all this regulation body, whenever a drug is produced, it can be anywhere in the country. If Pfizer comes out with a new drug, they want to release in the market. First of all, these agencies should approve where this drug is going to be used in that particular country. So that is one. So they file an IND that is called as investigational new drug. Once that is done, to the regulatory bodies, they will submit and get an initial approval for the drug. Then it will go to the human trials. So what they do is there are a lot of ways of human trials. Say they it called as so if, for example, they have some samples 1 to 100 for just trying to do the efficacy of the drug, 1 to true what is the side effects of the drug. So similarly, they have, say, for 100 people or 1,000 people across the globe, they will identify without the name. So they need to sign a consent and they identify who are volunteers to take those drugs. So that is called human clinical trials. First, we had clinical trials on animals, that is preclinical testing, and then it goes for human. So once they see the effectiveness of the drug and how it is working with the human bodies, and they do a lot of research there also. What is the side effects, whether the patient is getting any other complications. Like for example, the blockbuster drug for AIDS. So it has side effects, which is more, it increases your diabetic level and also in terms of the blood pressure levels. And obesity is also created. So these are all some of the side effects, and even other drugs causes some side effects. So all this has to be recorded, monitored, and reported back to the regulatory bodies for that country. So once that is done, they go in for the formal approval. So they call it as new drug application, where FDA or any other regulatory bodies, which we discussed, will approve the drug. And once that is approved, then only they go for bulk manufacturing, and then sales and marketing happens across the different countries. So even though it goes out for different countries, so they need to call as an adverse events. So what is happening? Anybody can report that, hey, this drug causes me some rashes in my body, and I need to report to the manufacturing or the owner of that particular drug. So this is the entire process of any drug, the life cycle of the any tablet or whatever you take, right? So until human clinical trials, it will all fall under your research and development. So that itself, usually for a normal life cycle, it takes 2 to 10 years of time. That is the level of effort they are putting. So many scientists are working in the background. And similarly, once it gets approved, it has a lot of manufacturing. The plant has to be certified uh, by the authorities. So they will come and audit periodically and see how the uh, checks are happening, what is the validation parameters and everything. And the post-market surveillance is report your adverse events. So this is the classification of the entire thing. So under R&D, we have good laboratory practices. So whatever is happening in the lab, it's called as good laboratory practices. And on the clinical trials, which is being administered both in animals and in humans. So this is called good clinical practice. And when it goes into manufacturing, it is called as good manufacturing practice. And we also have good distribution practice, which is again your supply chain, how you logistics of distributing the drugs across the globe. So International Society of Pharmaceutical Engineers have created some standards to all this. It's called as good laboratory practice, good clinical practice, and good manufacturing practice, and good distribution practice. So all this put together, so they can't put separately GLP, GCP, GMP and all. So that is where they have put the word X in between. X can be replaced by either L, which is good laboratory practices, C, which is good clinical practices, and M, which is good manufacturing practices. It's every aspects of the process has to be documented, stored, and retained for a definite period of time. So because everything is subject for audits by the regulation agencies. So this is how it is. And if you look at fda.org, so the CFR is nothing but Code of Federal Regulations, Chapter 21 and Section 11 talks about entire systems that is supporting behind this business process. Say, for example, um, R&D, right? So there are a lot of IT systems that support the process, like during the clinical trials, how clinical trials are managed, how exactly the reports are generated, and how it is stored. Entire thing is defined in this particular regulation. Um, and see why all this happening. See, definitely the fine that will be put by the regulatory bodies is so huge that the company will lose the definitely the confidence in the market, and the reputation will go, and you know there will definitely loss of market share is also happening, and even they can close and put a seal on the manufacturing unit if it is not operating as per the defined guidelines. So that is the level of stringence. So why? Because all this is related to human, right? Human, uh, lives. So it has to be your patient safety, your efficacy of the drug, and the data integrity that is happening in terms of manufacturing of the drug. So this is the consequence they will face, and ultimately they might one day lose in terms of closing the entire market. Say, for example, recent citation was Pfizer, one of the manufacturing plant in Goa, has to be shut down for at least 6, 7 months, which has incurred them a loss of about, say, 2.2 billion. So that is the level of loss they will incur if they're not having those evidences, or the process are not being deviations and everything. So that is the importance they're giving for the human lives and also the drug that is being produced. So coming back to the IT side of it. So we talked about the business. Coming back to the IT side of it. So in each area, the IT system, always there will be automation. So automation is done based on your with help of the IT systems. So what they did is they also came out with a standard called GAMP. GAMP is nothing but good automated manufacturing practice, which combines all your, this GCPs, or good clinical practice, or good laboratory practice, or good manufacturing practice, and then supply chain, which is good distribution practice. So this particular GAMP standard says any GXP system which is supporting the business process, which affects the patient safety or the quality of the product, and the data integrity that is behind the product, is termed as GXP. And it talks about different aspects. So any software development, right, has to follow a life cycle approach, meaning it has to have phases like, you know, uh, whenever they want to go into, they have to have a initial or planning phase. And this planning phase, they will come out with the business case, and then see what is the alternatives which we can use, and also in terms of the requirements, what exactly the system should perform. And then the exact project execution phase starts, where your entire SDLC lifecycle will fall, like right from your requirements, development, testing, and then it is released to production for use. So once it is released to production for use, then the operations kick in. Like, how do you maintain the configuration item of the system? So nobody can tamper the system, and it has to be verified frequently. So if we want to make a change to the system or add any functionality to the IT system, they will ask, there should be a specific process that has to be followed. A change request has to be raised. An impact analysis of the change should be performed, and there should be a CAB, change advisory board, who will approve the change, and there is a partner who will develop the change and test the change, and then it goes for the release. So this is entire cycle that will have followed across the entire life cycle of the NNEF. And then the last phase is more of retirement of the system, which is the sunset. So this is how they have structured the entire process around any IT systems that is supporting the business process for producing a duck. Um, so what GAMP has categorized any software. So they have 5 category of applications or systems, whatever you call. So category 1 is more with the underlying infrastructures, like your OS. You have your configuration products, and then category 2 is more of embedded systems, which is not in our scope. Category 3 is more of, standard non-configurable software, which is your MS Office is one of the typical example, right? And similarly, category 4 is you buy a product which is commercially off the shelf products that can be configured without any change in the code, then it will fall under category 4. And there is category 5, which is more either you develop it from the scratch or any customization we are doing over and above the configured software product. So that is how they have categorized. So why they have categorized is the rigor and the amount of documentation and the evidence that we need to maintain for these kind of applications. The category of application will vary from the category. So basically, you would have heard a word of risk assessment, right? Regulatory risk assessment. Basically, what they do is they categorize in which category of the application this particular solution falls into, and what is the rigor or the level of documentation that uh, the process team has to put in to ensure that the system is performing what it intend to do. So, so that is why they have put a stringent mechanism there, and the level of uh, checkpoints or the quality gates vary from uh, category 5 will have more stringent testing because it's being developed, and similarly configurable software package will have little lower than that, and similarly non-configurable software will have lower than that. So nowadays they are mostly in a life sciences industry, if you see, they go with either category 4 or 5. And the current trend shows they are not even going for category 5. Mostly they will go into category 4, and very small customization, meaning change in the code, will happen because of all this. So every company like Viva or Salesforce, they are very focused on what is required in the industry, and that's how they develop the products also. So interestingly, we will look at some of the industry leading products across the pharma value chain, right? So under R&D, um, critical applications, right? So we need clinical trial management systems and then clinical data management systems. So basically, if you look at all this, um, Oracle has a very strong hold. Oracle Clinical or Oracle Health Cloud is where they're majorly holding the market. And if you see manufacturing and supply chain, there are a lot of products like manufacturing execution systems. Viram is there for tracing, where the drug is, how do you the traceability established. So that is TraceLink. And similarly, we have for project planning, Planisware or a lot of other products are there. And ITSM service now is what mostly they use. Um, and if you look at, regulatory information systems, like RIMS, they call it as. Viva has come out with an entire stack of tools, stack of applications. They call it as Viva Vault, which consists of entire solution, right from your regulatory applications or safety or anything, quality docs. And similarly, we have document management system, like what they call it as GDRS, right? So either Documentum is there, and then there are other applications. Now even Viva has also come out with that particular applications. And then CRM, definitely there are two players. One is Salesforce, because they have specifically uh, configured products for Health Cloud or Marketing Cloud. So that is exactly it is happening. And mostly manufacturing is driven by SAP, all end-to-end flow, like your incoming goods, entire inventory is managed through SAP systems. Apart from that, I was talking about the post-market surveillance, pharmacovigilance. So there are three projects, three applications currently in the market. One is Argus, which is from Oracle, and then there is Ares Global, which is also doing the similar thing. And now Viva Safety has also come as part of the Viva Vault. And the other critical application is LIMS, Laboratory Information System. So again, there are two major products like Labware or LabVantage. So these are all the industry leading products you will come across. You will whenever you work in any life sciences industry, definitely these products or the applications are we are going to use it. And at least at high level, we need to know what is this kind of applications. So yeah,
Daniel,
yeah.
sorry for interruption. So, in this slide, like, are we going to deal with all the sections, like whatever is mentioned here, and all these tools, are we using it or some specific one?
No, actually, mostly I think they use this laboratory information systems. They use LIMS. They are using CSL. First Documentum. They are using, and then they are using Oracle Clinical Health Sciences. Inform they are using for clinical data management, and then SAP systems. They are using, and then they are using TrackWise Stackwise is more to queuing. They use Argus and also Viva Vault. So similarly, I think most of the applications will be common only.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, before getting into the details of what is what, so any questions, please?
One more thing, in the very first slide that you have shown us, so in that I saw there is like two approval we need. One was IDA and then NDA. And
Mhm.
can
Yeah.
we see the first slide, please? Yes, file NDA. So, like I'm very new to pharma domain, so I'm asking this. So you told like we need approval from the company or country's organization. So since this is like a global manufacturing, right? So do we take approvals from both the sections, like countries specific and then to the global as well, or how it is handled when it comes to approval process?
No, if you want to market your drug in US, it will be federal regulation body, FDA. If you want to market your drug in Europe, you need to get approval from EMA, that is European Medical Agency. Similarly, each
Okay.
country has to give some approval. And if you have a manufacturing site, in India, there are a lot of manufacturing site, especially
Yeah.
in the areas of Goa, and even in Chennai, we have three, four companies.
Yes.
So all that, for the respective country has to approve it. And the manufacturing, see, if it is Pfizer is a US based company, so mostly they will get the approval from FDA only. So most of the countries now are US based companies, especially in this particular line. Um, you take the top 25 pharma companies are from US, and there are companies like Sanofi, which is headquartered in France, and then there is GSK, which is headquartered in UK, and Novo Nordisk. Novartis is headquartered in this place, Switzerland, Basel, and so wherever they are headquartered, they might. But everybody go to all these regulatory bodies and is predominantly dominated by FDA because most of them are US based companies. US market is the major market that they have.
Thank you.
Any questions, please, before we get into so what is GXP?
Yes, Daniel, can you go back to the first slide, please? Yeah. So now we learned about, all these like where does this good laboratory practices or GCP practices or GMP practices fall in this entire drug life cycle. But do we also need to learn what those exact practices are as part of GLP or GCP or GMP?
No, I don't think from an IT perspective,
Yeah.
21 CFR Part 11 is what they have very much specified for IT systems. So we will look into that. What are all the different clauses of 21 CFR Part 11? 21 CFR is nothing but Code of Federal Regulations, Chapter 21, Section 11,
Okay.
which is available on the site. If you to go to fda.org, it will give everything. And similarly, Europe has their own, they call it as
Regulations,
Annex
correct.
11, Annex 11 for IT systems, which is both are similar, but some addition here and there.
Okay, sure.
So
Yeah.
yeah, we'll just look at a definition of GXP. So as I told, it's a collective good practices or a guideline and regulations encompassing of your good manufacturing practice or your clinical practice or your laboratory practice or your storage practice. Even storage, they have some standards. So this is the temperature we need to store. This is how it has to be. What is the shelf life of this drug? Everything is defined. And then distribution practice, and then the restoration practice. And it covers the entire thing, not only drugs, but food, medical devices, and cosmetics. So all these regulations will apply for these areas also. It can be any pharma companies, or it can be any food industry, or it can be any medical devices industry, or even for cosmetics. So all these standards are defined. So, so these are all some of the terminologies. Uh, how we want to practice. See, the purpose is, I told you, one is in terms of the traceability. So every batch that is going out of the factory has to be traced back with all the evidences. So the records of that particular batch, right? So right from the invoices of the raw materials, right from inspection reports for the raw materials, the lab instruments, the manufacturing execution systems, everything has to be calibrated and has to work as per the intended use. So that is why they have set up all this. So what is difference between a GXP system and a non-GXP system? See, any system that supports directly or indirectly, which will impact for the drugs, which will have the patient safety or product quality or data integrity, right? So all that systems will fall under GXP. For example, LIMS. LIMS is a laboratory information system. See, all the samples that is coming out of the manufacturing plant will be tested for quality checks. So unless you have that, you will not uh, ensure that the batch that is coming out of that particular thing is accurate. So that is why this system is called as GXP, right? And it has to comply with the 21 CFR Part 11. So Annex 11, EU Annex 11 is for the same thing, but for European countries. And like there are other regulation also. If you 21 CFR talks about a lot of things, a lot of chapters are there. How a manufacturing GMP, good manufacturing practice should be there. 210, 211 talks about that. 820 talks about more on the medical devices, how exactly the medical devices should be tested, designed, how it verified everything. See, non-GXP system is there is no impact uh, either on the patient, direct impact, I should say. So like, for example, your CRM application, which is more after sales and marketing, right? So, or Workday, which uh, doesn't have any impact on patient safety. So it's more like a human capital HCM system. So, but there is also other regulations it has to satisfy because uh, data privacy is coming in. There are SOX related controls for financial applications. HIPAA is nothing but your Health Information Portability Act. So you can't share a personal information, or I can't view your health records, and also I can't view your PII, personal identity information. So all this are very critical in terms of when it comes to data integrity part of it. So that's how they have put the controls. And so we talked about that. Um, so let us look at 21 CFR Part 11, what exactly it talks about. So any record that is created by the system in electronic records or a validated electronic signature, how controlled it should be. Like, how do we modify it? How do you create it, modify it, maintain it, and archive it and retrieve it whenever there is an audit? and it is applicable for submission when there is an audit. So FDA does a lot of audits in all the manufacturing plants across the world, and even EMA has their own audits. So any audit that is going to come, they will trace back from that batch of drug to the very requirements of the IT systems. So that is the level of traceability they would look into. They will backtrace the entire batch to the even the IT systems that is supporting all this process. So that is why they take it very seriously, right? So coming back to Part 11 requirements, which is more specific to the IT systems. So what they say is there are two kinds of systems. One is open systems, which is accessible from outside the network also. And then there is a closed system, which is more inside and secured. So what they say is any IT system that support this business process has to be validated, meaning the entire life cycle process of developing the IT system. So we discussed about a life cycle approach, right? So we need documented evidence that the system has gone through a process, and all documentation and evidence are captured along with the timestamp and the signature who has done it. So entire system can be traced back for all these audits. So that's what they call it as validation of system. And then how exactly the system generates records, right? How do you generate records? You can't go and tamper any records. Once it is, that is why in life sciences industry, when we test, we take the timestamps and also we put a digital signature. So they will definitely trace back and say this time this particular step has been executed, and this will be kept for a defined period of retention, let's say 8 years or 10 years. So all that, and that's called protection of records. And similarly, access restriction, right? Any system cannot be accessed by all. So there are access restrictions, and there should be a documented evidence stating these are the people, the roles, their access for that particular system. And then there is audit trials, meaning uh, who has logged into the system, what time, any changes, who is doing the modification of the system, what is the time, and whether they are authorized and it is being approved by an authority of people. So that is audit trials. All the changes that we do for the system has to be documented, and audit trials has to be produced. Authority checks, that's what the checks that we perform if any changes, like cab, for example, any change will be approved by the change advisory board members. It consists of technical SMEs, business SMEs, validation experts, and all that. And similarly, the person who is performing the job has to be trained. That's why we have so many mandatory trainings, right? So that's why they take it very seriously. And similarly, the signature. So the digital signature has to be controlled, verified, and the role has to be provided for that control. And then finally, the documentation control. So any document has to have an audit trail. What is the version? Who has changed? Who has reviewed? Who has approved? That's why they use the documentum GDRS system. So you can see the entire history of the documentation, who has updated, why they have updated, everything. So, so these are all some of the key critical items which any IT, any pharma or medical devices or biotechnology companies follow. Even banking, they have regulations, but still this is more followed because of, you know, it is human health is more important than anything else, right? So that's what it is. So validation of a system, meaning um, testing is part of validation. It's a very small part of validation. So right from the documentations, from your requirements to your design, your code reviews, and testing. So testing is where a very small part of the entire validation life cycle, which is also predominantly important. So that is how we need to understand. And this is just a difference of Annex 11 and 21 CFR Part 11. Some of the things they have added more, like if you say uh, the risk management, and then there is supplier change and configuration management, periodic reviews. So all that they've batch releases, business continuity, all the new additional features they've included in Annex 11. So that is how it is actually, but mostly it is similar, and some additional features which is covered as part of other regulations like information security, or HIPAA, or data privacy regulations. So all that will be covered. So just to give a gist of it, so why we are doing all this, uh, that's what I wanted to say, right? And so whenever we talked about a key aspect of computer system validation, they call it as CSV. Now it is slowly maturing towards CSA, where they call it, instead of validation, they are calling it as assurance model. So meaning how effectively we can use a risk-based approach for validating any application that is supporting this business process. So one, in terms of the amount of documentation that goes along with the different phases of the life cycle, and also the rigor of testing also has come down in terms of the high priority requirements, high risk requirements. We need to do both positive and negative scenarios, end-to-end flows. Um, but if it is a low risk requirement, we can just do even ad hoc testing or unscripted testing without even having a test cases. So these are all some of the models we want to, they are coming to bring in terms of the assurance model. So any system that is said to be validated has to be documented throughout the system development lifecycle. And the rigor of documentation depends upon your regulatory risk assessment and the intended use of that system. So that's how it is defined. And any system which a change has to be done has to be formally approved, least where the changes are following a documented change control process. That's where we have the entire change management process, right? How exactly the flow will work. So these are all some of the guidelines. So this is exactly how the validation flow will work. Um, so you start with a risk assessment. So we usually hear a name called CSA, right? So these people will be more responsible for the entire documentation of this life cycle, right? So they prepare the validation plan, user requirements by the business, and functional specification. And then you have the design qualification, which is more of your code reviews and reviews of the design specification documents. So once a system is built, you deploy it into a QA environment. before that you do an installation qualification. So here your right hand side is where the entire testing phases will come up to performance qualification, operational qualification, and installation qualification, which is nothing but installation qualification is installation verification, whether uh, entire CIs has been installed correctly, tested it, and documented it. And similarly, operational qualification is your functional testing. So what we do as SIT, um, so that is mostly done by any IT team only. And then the performance qualification comes, which is your UAT. So some company terminologies called as installation qualification. Some they don't call it. They call it as installation verification. Some call it as instead of operational qualification. Some call it as SIT itself. But they do a dry run and then a formal in any GXP systems. So that's how they do. And similarly, UAT. Um, some call as UAT and some call as performance qualification. And then finally, they produce a validation report, summarizing all the activities that has happened to develop this particular software, right, or performing any configurations. So any questions so far? So our testing will fall uh, right on the right hand side of the V model. So starting from, we are involved in only one box. So SI, your operational qualification SIT, right? And UAT, we do some support. So all other activities are done by, the technical teams or the CSV or the CSA, they call it as, will review all the documentation. They need to sign off all the documentation. So they follow a process in terms of the rigor that they need to come out with. Yeah.
Daniel, just one question here, Neeti this side. So we do understand like there are a lot of process and a lot of things which you explained, but I'm just trying to understand from our standpoint, like from SIT standpoint, right? Be it a wider term, a testing standpoint. So there are different roles like CSA or whosoever will be doing the validations for those documents. But when we particularly talk about the testing team, apart from identifying that whether this is a GXP or non-GXP project, how does it really differentiate our work? Actually, I'm just trying to understand that like whatever testing we will do, we will how does it differ if it is really a GXP project? If it is non-GXP, then I think documentation will again be the same, right? But if it is a GXP project, does it going to impact any testing procedures apart from creating the additional documents?
Yes, so from a testing process perspective, so it is all related to your functional risk assessment, which you perform. Here, I think they don't differentiate between a non-GXP system and a GXP system. See, non-GXP system, all these are not mandated. So
Hmm.
you don't, if you're not doing functional risk assessment also, it is not subjected for audits, right? But if it is GXP, definitely an approach for functional risk assessment has to be completed. And the testing should follow a approach of risk-based testing. Like if the requirement is very high critical for the business, right? The diagram shows, right? It high critical, then the rigor of testing varies from, say, you need to cover the scenarios with
Got it.
positive, negative,
Hmm.
end to end, and all that.
Okay,
And it has to be documented. So,
understood.
and the usually what in other organization they do is, see, SIT is done in a test environment, and then the formal execution of the same SIT is done in a qualified or a controlled environment. That is where we do the installation verification, and then you do the operational qualification, which is again similar to your SIT, and the performance qualification, which is similar to UAT. And even before they move to production, they will do a small production PPQ, uh, production performance qualification. So this is the level of, and entire activities is documented, and it is when you do the execution of each and every step, screenshots are captured
Okay.
for the evidence along with the timestamp. See, non-GXP side, it is not mandated. Here, I think CSL, they don't want to segregate between a GXP, so everything they are doing, but they don't call it as uh, OQ or PQ. So all that they do is they do the installation verification and ensure that the system has been installed correctly, and then they directly go into SIT, which is see, the dry run is performed before the formal execution is done. So there are two cycles of SIT. I don't think there is two cycles of SIT in non-GXP, but still they are doing. That's not mandated though. Why they are doing a dry run is, see, if you find the build which is released for testing is not stable, and you're creating so many defects, for each defect for a GXP system, you need to give root cause analysis, why that defect has happened, and which will lead into a lot of audit findings. See, that is why what they do is they do a small dry run and ensure that nothing major issue is not there, and then only they go for formal SIT testing here, where they document everything, the timestamps, the digital signatures, and uh, very rigor, and that will be approved by the QA and the business owner. So that is the level of rigor they have put.
Understood, understood. So from testing standpoint, basically there will be a separate set of risk-based testing will come up along with some new environment also where they can do the control testing. Okay,
Yes.
I mean, got it.
The environment should be controlled before you execute formal testing. So meaning controlled meaning we need to do the installation verification
Hmm.
and document it and ensure that the system, the entire CIs are installed properly, that the system is working by doing a small smoke test, nothing is breaking. So all that only, then only they'll release for SIT.
Got it. Got it. Thank you.
So this is more details. So once you have some time, you can just go through it. Some of the old time they use handwritten entries, which is going to be a nightmare. Definitely now HPALM, Codebeamer, a lot of tools have come. Otherwise, it's going to really, they will have paper-based. Each and every step you need to write it, accept it, put screenshot, attach the screenshot, sign it. Each and every step you need to sign it. So that was doing. I think thanks to ALM and other tools, which saved a lot of automation, which saved a lot of time, right? So this is ultimately to just summarize what, why documentation, right? Voices of from different regulatory agencies or experts. Your documents are the proof of your work. So definitely we need to document of what we are doing. And there should be subjective evidence that has to go with along with any activities that you are performing. So that is where the more emphasis is being given for documentation side. And so now I think after all this automation have come, slowly they are trying to move towards, you know, computer system assurance,